Hey guys, welcome to Masquerade of Motherhood, or as I like to call it, the Mom Show. I'm your host, Courtney Doyle, and this is a place where I am giving you permission to not have it all together. Hey guys, welcome back to the Unmasking Me series. This is actually part 12. I can't believe that I've gotten this far into this series, and a little behind the scenes, I guess you would say. Some of this I actually wrote a couple of years ago, and it was just what God had laid on my heart to explore mothers in the Bible, look at their stories from the perspective of as a woman, as a mom, look at their children. And so this is little tidbits of a book that I've been writing for quite some time and really need to finish. And so if you would be in prayer with me about really using this summer to focus my time on finishing that, I would greatly appreciate it, because I managed to get squirreled by other things. Not bad things either. Sometimes it's all good things, but I can absolutely find myself wandering in other directions and doing things that probably aren't what I necessarily should be spending my time doing. So anyway, I am trying very hard to spend some time this summer and be obedient to what I know God had called me to several years ago, which is interesting because today's story talks a lot about obedience. And so let's just jump right in. Today's story is painful, yet freeing. How do we experience both feelings? How do we experience obedience, courage, trust that sometimes can be painful, but on the other side gives us freedom? Let's jump right in. There are so many aspects of motherhood that are quite challenging. Some start right off the bat with pregnancy. Then there's delivery, and then you've got sleepless nights, maybe with a colicky baby. Each season of motherhood brings its own set of challenges. For me, thus far, my toughest challenge has been letting go. I remember the first time I left our oldest son at his very first daycare. I was a mess. There was no go and enjoy your time or get all the work done. You're going to have a quiet house. My heart was at that daycare, and my thoughts were scrambled from the best to the worst case scenarios of what could happen in a 9 to 2 time frame. He thrived, and I cried. Baby number 2 was a different story. He loved his mama, and he loved my hip. He was the child that cried, and I was the mom standing outside the door tallying up all the ways I was letting him down by leaving him. Then I get to kiddo number 3, and you would think this was getting easier, but that kiddo, she would have ridden a bus to Mother's Day out as an infant if I would have let her. As a matter of fact, funny story, when she was in kindergarten, Big Brother, the one who preferred my hip, was struggling so much with going to school that the principal suggested maybe we should make the separation at the bus stop. I wanted no part of my kids riding the bus. Driving them to and from school was my job. I'm a stay-at-home mom. But we were desperate to make mornings better, not just for him, but for all of us. So there we are. We're standing at the bus stop. He's ready to be a big boy, and he's going to get on. As the bus rolls to a stop, he begins to take steps back. The door opens, and with a huge smile, the bus driver welcomes my 2 children. But there was only one child. John Scott is now sprinting down the road back to the house faster than an Olympic sprinter running for gold. Chandler, on the other hand, is prancing up the stairs like she's Miss America headed to get her crown. I turn to chase John Scott. Doors close. Off the bus goes with my baby girl. You can just imagine the panic that set in. She was only riding the bus because Big Brother was riding the bus. He was going to walk her to class. He was going to sit with her on the bus. She was 5 years old and has no clue how to handle any of this because we had not talked to her about it. She didn't even know how to get to class from the unloading zone of the bus. It was just a whirlwind of a morning. I am happy to report that she did, in fact, survive. I, on the other hand, have lived to tell this story over and over again. And when I do, I can tap back into those feelings that I had that day as that bright yellow bus drove away with my little girl. And I'm sprinting down the road chasing my little boy. Anyway, look, leaving them at Mother's Day out, I don't care how many you have done that with, is never easy. Dropping them off to their first day of school, watching them drive off on their own in their own car, leaving them at college, or letting go when their adult decisions have led them astray. Letting go and letting God is so much easier said than done. Just when we feel like we're the only ones struggling with this release, we have an example of a mother who knew letting go would be her greatest sacrifice without knowing that her sacrifice would be a nation's greatest blessing. Let's jump into Exodus chapter 2 and the story of Moses. Now look, many of us know his name, but few know his mother's name. So here's a little background information to catch us up. We have the Israelites who are increasing in strength and numbers, and an Egyptian Pharaoh who has them enslaved. And he's worried because they continue to grow in numbers and strength, and he does not want them to take over and overpower the Egyptians. His solution is, kill all male babies born to Hebrew women. What he did first is he initially tasked this duty to 2 Hebrew midwives. Their names are very often overlooked, but I want to share them here. It was Shipra and Puah. Now, this is what it says. It says, when you help the Hebrew women give birth, this is Pharaoh talking to these 2 midwives. He says, when you help these Hebrew women give birth, observe them as they deliver. If the child is a son, kill him. But if it's a daughter, she may live. The midwives, however, feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt had told them. They let the boys live. They knew better. They couldn't do what Pharaoh was asking because they feared God. These 2 women are examples of courage to stand up for what is right and stand against what is wrong. A lesson I think we need to exercise, and we certainly need to teach our children. I'm not going to normally teach my kids to disobey authority, but in this case, it was necessary, and they did. Their courage came from the truth of who God was and what they believed about him. As moms, we too need to have courage to stand for what is right and against what is wrong, and teach our children. Not everything is acceptable, but obeying God and his word is, and that should always come above and beyond obeying what society tells us and what man tells us. Now, I'll get off that soapbox, but I just wanted to highlight those 2 ladies as having courage to go against what they had been ordered to do in order to obey God. And we all need to take a lesson in that. But let's get back to Jochebed. That's a different story. When the midwives weren't helping with the murder of the baby boys and the numbers were continuing to increase, Pharaoh now is very concerned. And so he gives orders to all people. And I quote, you must throw every son born to the Hebrews into the Nile, but let every daughter live. So now it's not just down to the midwives, it's everybody. Everybody is tasked to do this. So Jochebed knew when she was pregnant that she was not going to change the law that she was living under, but she also knew that she had to be courageous and attempt to give Moses the life that he deserved, though the law and everyone around her is against her. When she had him, and for as long as she could, she kept him. But then she knew she couldn't keep him any longer, so she built a basket, covered it in tar and pitch. She placed him in the basket and sent him along the riverbanks of the Nile River. She pushed him out, and she walked away. The very place that was a place of evil and death for other babies would ultimately become a place of rescue and redemption for Moses, and in the future, an entire nation. Every fiber of her being had to have been broken and worried about what could potentially happen. If her courage isn't enough, her trust in God far exceeds what most of us can exhibit. Imagine for a moment laying your child's life down and trusting God to do with it as He wishes. Seems a little far-fetched, this story of a mama laying a baby in a basket in a river and walking away. But Mom, we're no different than Jochebed. We may not be laying our 3-month-old babies in baskets in rivers, as hard as that is to imagine, but we should be surrendering our control, our desires, and our dreams for those children to God. The only way we can have the courage to do this, though, and to trust God's perfect plan and design for our kids is if we know Him personally and intimately. It starts with us. Look, I don't bat an eye at allowing my kids to go stay with family, even some of my closest friends, because I know they love my kids. I know they're going to protect my kids, and they're going to care for them as I would. But let me ask you, why is God different? Why don't we trust Him with our kids? I'm going to venture to say, maybe because we haven't trusted Him with ourselves. Our heartaches, our past, our guilt, maybe our present discouragement. Do you trust Him at all? I can talk a good talk about trusting God and about laying my child at His feet, and for years I have visualized what that would look like. And man, sometimes I felt so proud and courageous that I am laying him or her at your feet, Jesus. And then one day God showed me that though I had laid him down, I was still holding on to a hand. I had not fully surrendered my control and my desires to God. I still held on. You see, the greatest and the most courageous move that Jochebed did wasn't the placing of the child in the basket and the pushing him down the river. It was the walking away. When I realized that I was still holding on to that hand, and God showed that to me, and I truly surrendered, I can tell you it's been the most painful and freeing thing I've ever done. Painful and freeing. The best part of Jochebed's story is God. He brought Moses back to his mother for her to care for him. He then placed him in a home of Pharaoh's daughter where he was well taken care of, and he ultimately used him as his rescue plan for the Israelites. One painful step of courage from a mother led to the freedom of a nation. Pain and freedom. I don't know what God may be calling you to lay down. I don't know what situation feels impossible for you to let go of, and what pain you feel at the thought of letting go and letting God. But just like the midwives and Jochebed and so many others that have come before us, God will bless our obedient hearts. What if the pain of a current situation is the very thing God is going to use as freedom? You know, I've talked a lot about names on these specific episodes. I love the meaning of names. And the name of Moses, who was given by Pharaoh's daughter, she named him. It means, I drew him out of water, a place of evil and death, and God brought life. A place where you may feel as though you're drowning, God can bring breath. The question is, do we trust Him enough to be obedient to the painful surrender and the ultimate freedom in our kids' lives and in ours? Until next time. If you want to print, screenshot, or share this week's verse, head to the show notes where you're going to find a link to my website and a graphic for you to use. Thanks so much for listening to Masquerade of Motherhood with Courtney Doyle. We want to be sure this blesses you and other mothers. And in order to do this, first, you must subscribe. This way you won't ever miss an episode. Also, if you'll rate and review this podcast on iTunes or wherever you're listening, this will increase our reach to other mothers who need a little encouragement, a community, and a whole lot of Jesus. We're so glad you're here.